All right, we're going to go ahead and keep moving here with World War One, and we have focused on already the parts of the war that lead, or the events that led up to the beginning of the war. Germany has invaded Belgium. The alliances are set, and Germany is in full swing trying to work out its Schlieffen Plan. Remember, the Schlieffen Plan is where Germany realized that it had to face a two-front war. Remember, a front is where two enemies face each other and actually meet. The lines are in a war. And Germany would have to face it on both their east and their west coast. On their east coast, or their eastern front, it would be Russia that they would have to face. And on the western front, it would be France. Now, between those two, France was the much better army. They had an amazing military, a glorious history of great commanders and just technology and different things that they had there. Whereas Germany also had an amazing, awesome army, and they were known for the precision. They had the material, they've been preparing for this plan for decades and ready to go. And then on the Eastern Front, you had Russia. What Russia had going for them was that there were a lot of Russians. And they could do something called conscription. It's kind of like a draft where they say people have to fight in the military, but even less voluntary than a draft. They basically come to your town and say if you are the ages between the ages of 16 and 35, you are a man, then you're going to war. And that's what they did. They would do that. So that's what Russia had going for them. But the Russian people were spread out over a massive area. And so Germany was planning on that it would take Russia a very long time to get its military up and running and moving, be able to invade through Poland, the Ukrainian area, and then eventually get to Berlin. So what Germany wanted to do with the Schlieffen Plan was swing through Belgium, a neutral territory, attack France, capture Paris, and then move back to the other side, swing its military around, and go and destroy Russia once they were ready to fight. And so that's what Germany did. They invaded Belgium, which we talked about in last episode, and they got hung up there. Belgium didn't let them go through easily. But another consequence of invading Belgium was the fact that it brought Britain in on the side of the Allies. And so now we have the three major allies, Russia, France, and Great Britain. They would also be called the Triple Entente. Entente means agreement in French. And so the Triple Agreement, the Triple Alliance, we would later call them the Allies. And then Germany, Austria Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire would become known as the Central Powers because most of them are the center of Europe there. And they would go through there. Now, while Germany is going through Belgium, they finally bust through the forts that were there. Remember, they had those massive guns that could shoot shells 4,000 yards, and they would go, or not 4,000, they would go up 4,000 yards and come down. Incredible situation, everything there. They bust through those forts, and they get into France. Well, their Schlieffen plan seems to be working well. Now, the way that they had planned it was that they would bust through Belgium here, but then the other parts of the German army would come up on this part here and swing around kind of like a big hammer and smash the French army, while the most of the French army was focusing on this little part here. And they would go and do that. Well, this culmination of events came to a head at a place called the Marne. Now, the Marne was a river there in France. And before this, we'd had something called the Battle of the Frontiers. We're not going to spend any time on that, but basically where the British enter the war and they join with France on the continent there, and they try to stop the French or they try to stop the German advance at the River Marne. The problem is with Britain, as I've mentioned before, they are a naval power. Their main ability comes from their navy, and they have an awesome navy, huge ships, massive guns, many ships that they have there. Top of the line, brand new things that are just incredible. And so what would happen there is that they would do that. So they had actually really small army to fight on land. And that was a big deal. That was a problem there. So they had to start their own draft, their own type of conscription that they would have there. But they sent what military they had. Now, one thing to know about the British military is even though they were a small military, they were one military that had the most experience of any other nation in the world at this point. And the reason is because they had for so long been fighting wars with their colonial entities that are there in India and in Africa and in parts of South America. So when they called on their reserves, these people were coming who were lawyers or butchers or teachers or preachers, and they would come in and then they would basically transform in a few hours from common citizens into these groups of soldiers that knew their job, that knew their duty. And they were from regiments that had been around since the Revolutionary War, these continual regiments. Now, obviously, people that fought in the Revolutionary War were not still fighting here, they would have been dead. But these same regiments were there, and they were historical regiments, and they were going to fight. But the British Expeditionary Force, or the BEF as it was called, lands there, and they joined France to help stop this German advance. Now, remember, as I mentioned before, at this point, there are still no good guys and bad guys. Both groups, both teams, if you will commit atrocities during this war. And there were things there. Germany did do some things in Belgium that they should not have done. But as they go through, this is going to be one of the first massive battles in this war. But it's not going to be the last one. It's not even going to be the biggest or the bloodiest. Honestly, the only reason this one makes it on any type of list of impressive battles is because it's the very first one. If this wasn't the first one, this would just been a typical battle in the war here of World War One. Well, the French are able to amass enough soldiers that they put out an army. And I say an army, there's actually several different armies, several groups of armies, but they put a force of over 1 million men. 1 million people. All men, all fighters, military age men. And as I mentioned before in the last video, the army that was sent out by the German command was, what was it, 4 or 5 times bigger than the largest stadium? This is 1 million people. This is almost 7 or 8 times bigger than the largest stadium in the world. A lot of people. It's hard for us to fathom and imagine that. But they send 1 million soldiers out against the German army, who has about 900,000 soldiers. And so they go there. Now, one of the things is, though, the German army has advanced. They're on a time crunch. They have to get to where they want to go. They have to get to Paris. And they get within 30 miles of Paris. That's not far. That is very, very close in terms of military engagements at this point. And so the French have to get their military out there fast because the Germans went way quicker. They soon realized Germany's been planning this for a while. So they have to get them out there, but they don't have any way to do it. This is before massive troop transports were available. But they did have taxis. And the government of France calls upon the taxis of Paris to transport the soldiers from the city and from the places where they had been forming up to the battlefield. And so there were miles and miles of taxis going round trip, picking troops up and dropping them off, and just keep on going through there, dropping these troops off at the front line so they'd be able to stop the German advance. And the taxis were willing to do it because they knew that if they didn't do this, the German troops would soon be in Paris. When the fighting finally took place, it was not a short battle. It took several days. It went through here. The French and British troops were able to punch a hole in the German lines. We were able to break the lines apart to a certain extent, and not only that, but we were able to halt the German advance. And the reason that is good, or well, beneficial, I say, for the French side, is because they stopped them. 30 miles away from Paris is where they stopped the German lines. It's not good for the Germans because their Schlieffen plan has been totally destroyed at this point. They no longer will be able to knock France out in a quick blow and then spin around and face Russia. That's not going to happen. Germany will now face a two-front war. One of the things that also with this battle shows, with the massive amounts of people and material and energy poured into this battle, is that these countries are able to take a punch. And what I mean by that is very few nations and countries and empires in the world history as a whole, maybe the Mongols, maybe the Romans to a certain extent, but really that's about it. If you were to go out and have a big army, two massive armies that would face each other on the battlefield, whichever one lost, that nation was done for. You lose your massive army, that's millions of dollars. That's thousands of men, maybe hundreds of thousands, but that's lots of men that are gone and destroyed. There's nothing standing between the enemy and the capital, and so they'd be able to go through and take it over. Well, now they've shown that Germany and France are able to take a punch. Imagine a boxing match where before it was if one they were both previously evenly matched, but you got one good hit and boom, down goes the boxer. So the one person stands up and is the victor. Well, now Germany and France are standing there and just boom, 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 punching each other with these hits. Both sides suffer around 250,000 casualties each. Now, a casualty is not necessarily just soldiers killed. A casualty means that they are no longer battle effective. France loses a lot of soldiers. They have 250,000 casualties. 80,000 of them are deaths. The rest of them, the 180,000, are injured to the point where they're no longer battle ready, battle available, and they have to go back. They have to go back behind the lines. Germany, same thing, loses 250,000 men, casualties, 67,000 deaths that they have there. And so they go and they each go back their own ways. And this is set up for many of the generals to realize this is going to be a long war. But one of the reasons there were so many casualties and so many deaths was because, again, they were using 19th century warfare tactics with 20th century military machines. Next video, we're going to go into the next major battle that'll take place and a couple of little areas that deal with there. Also, I want to talk about how the situation would develop so that the nations are taking punches and different things there, but also what is happening on the home front of these different countries and what is taking place there. For your homework, there is a homework assignment today. It's page 141 in your activities manual. You do need to do that. There are 20 questions, but be aware underneath the map there is a little part where you need to do some coloring and some shading of the different areas there. Make sure you do it and get that done there. Pay attention to the maps that's there. There are maps in your books that you can use for this. If you want to Google a World War I map, that's also fine. But please pay attention to this. Send me the pictures when you are done. Hope you guys have a good day.